So you're here to talk about the laboratory of mind at work. So I'm a bit curious. So what's behind your topic, and what made you to share your thoughts with us here in ScanAgile?
Yeah, so I'm both a psychologist and an engineer, so I have been working in organizational development for many years, and also with private and individual customers in occupational health services as a psychologist. So I've seen that there are many challenges when we are doing knowledge work, and it has to do with knowledge being actually nowadays more and more in our minds and in relationships. And I wanted to have a little bit of different viewpoints of how to study the mind, develop the mind, and use it in work context, because our educational system doesn't really teach us so much to deal with our own minds in these fields.
Okay, interesting. So you said that you're combining both theory and actually your own experience in this presentation. So can you briefly tell us something about your work life? So from where you draw your experiences?
Yeah, like I said, I've been working in organizational development for quite a while, and lots of experiences from there, as well as from this therapeutic work that I do with clients also. So I've actually written a few books about the philosophy of mind and these meditative practices also that are quite useful and nowadays used a lot in the mental health organizations and workplaces and everywhere. So I try to combine some of the ideas from the theories of complexity sciences, psychology, and these organizations, and put it in a little bit of synthesis of what kind of different aspects we could look at when we are working, uh, especially in our own mind. Thus the uh, title of this presentation, The Laboratory of Mind, which is actually the title of my latest book also in Finnish, Mielen laboratorio.
Okay, this sounds so interesting. So maybe we let you to the stage. So let's check that your presentation works so I can give the whole stage for yourself.
Yes. Okay,
Okay.
is it visible?
It's visible. Okay, stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so welcome all to this my presentation. My name is Ari-Pekka Skarp, and I will talk about this laboratory of mind at work specifically. So let's start with looking at a little bit of what is work. What are we talking about? The late great Esko Kilpi said that work is interaction between interdependent people. So work is interaction between interdependent people. Where does this sentence come from? I discussed these topics with Esko quite many times, and here's one kind of a summary of what this means. So I would say that our mind is actually interdependent to the core. So it is fully interdependent phenomenon. And it takes actually three people to develop self-conscious mind. This idea comes from George Mead's developmental psychology theory. So first we have two people who are interacting. Let's say a baby is interacting with a caretaker, mother usually. At first it will be very intense relationship where there is no separateness between the baby and the caretaker. At some point there will be more consciousness of the separateness, but only when there will be this developmental stage where this child understands that there's actually third person involved also, who is seeing also the relationship between me and the other person. So this triangle is the kind of a developmental basis of our mind. And in this triangle, individual will learn that people not only respond to his gestures, but they also interpret them. There's me and there's the other person that I'm having a relationship with. And then there's a witness, a third person somewhere who is witnessing this relationship. And this understanding will actually influence how we will behave in these relationships. And like I said, this is the triangle where we develop this self-conscious mind. And this is in all our relationships, also in our work teams and groups where we are residing. So if we will continue a little bit with this idea, here's a little picture of this triangle in a group setting. So there's many individuals here that are having these relationships, and there's at least 3 dimensions of mind that are always there in each of the situations we find ourselves in. First dimension is this internal mind, so our kind of feeling of separate identity from the rest of us. This is the first dimension. Then we have this relationship, direct relationship with others. George Mead would have said with significant others. And this is the interpersonal aspect. And then there will be this third aspect that I call a social dimension of mind, where we have lots of people who are seeing the relationships between people. And we will also see a lot of not just individuals, but also relationships between these individuals. So we will be in kind of a quite complex environment all the time when we are in human groups, in work settings also. So if you think about our work context, especially when we are in the fields of knowledge work, it can look something like this. We have lots of different people. Some of these we know personally, some we don't know so well. Those people have relationships with us, with each other, with other peoples that we don't see or know. And there will be emotions, there will be goals with these people. There will be different kind of relationships and histories that are developed also. And when we will have this kind of a complex environment, there will be many different challenges that come to this knowledge work. And I have picked up the 3 different perspectives here. These actually all come from this social complexity, but I call this the attentional complexity, the cognitive complexity, and the social complexity. So all of these 3 challenges are present all the time when we are doing a little bit more advanced knowledge work, and even in more traditional fields of work, these are somewhat present also. So I will walk you through with these 3 different challenges. The first challenge is this attentional complexity. So what does this mean is that our locus of attention has to be divided on multiple digital platforms and a variety of face-to-face interactions. And these are actually emerging unintentionally. We can't control these very well, and they are all requiring our responses. So, for example, it used to be so that we had mostly face-to-face interaction, perhaps some phone calls, but nowadays we will have different kind of digital platforms, social media, whatever. And it is quite a challenge for many of us to hold our attention. And the antidote for this challenge is actually concentration. So here we have a picture of a stream of consciousness in the middle. This is based on the cognitive theory of mind, actually, where we see mind emerging in these moments of consciousness that are following each other, like if you go to a movies, you have pictures after each one so fast that it seems that the picture is alive. So in the same way, we have these moments of consciousness following each other. The blue circles here are moments where we are actually focusing on a task that we are supposed to do in our work. That will go on sometime, but at some point there will be disturbances, the devices, whatever, our internal disturbances. This red clock might mean that I remember suddenly that the deadline is coming quite close and I'm in a hurry and I will feel stressed. Can I finish this task on time, or what will happen? And the next association is then that I need to have some tea or coffee to get a little bit more concentrated. And then the next association is that, well, actually I'm also quite hungry. Perhaps I should eat something to raise up my sugar levels, and perhaps that pizza place on the corner, that's quite good. But no, there's so much calories if I eat this pizza that then I have to go and exercise. Perhaps cycling. No, it's raining outside. Perhaps I go to swimming. And this goes on for some time when we realize that, well, actually I need to do this task because now I'm even more late. Okay, so concentration actually needs two things. It needs mindfulness and focus. And mindfulness is really the ability to notice where our attention is residing, what is going on in the moments of consciousness. And when we notice this, then the focus is next thing. It keeps attention in place. So we need both ability to know where our attention is and ability to keep it in place in the task that we are supposed to do. But our mind works so that different kind of association can hijack our consciousness, and then there will be disturbances. But this is something that we can train. And actually one practice you could do during this presentation is to keep note when your mind starts to wander somewhere else but to this presentation. Just take note of this and try to be aware of it. Develop the skill of mindfulness there. Okay, so that's the first one. Then the second challenge is cognitive complexity. And what this means is that, it used to be so that if we want to know something, we read a good book about it or attend some, lecture or something like this. And that's how we gain knowledge. But nowadays, the knowledge is actually more and more socially constructed and continually evolving quite rapidly and non-systematically distributed in relationships that are actually both rational and emotional. And this is quite a challenge for us in this cognitive side. Because if you think about how many times you have to update your knowledge in certain fields, you have to be continuously having discussions and networking with people to keep in touch with the latest understanding what is happening. And now our emotions also affect this a lot, because if it's socially constructed, then the relationships that we have has a huge impact on our knowledge. And we tend to have relationships where we like the people and not perhaps so much with people that we don't like. So we are also living in a little bit of a bubble of this knowledge created with like-minded people. And the antidote for this challenge, cognitive complexity, is clarity of mind. And there are a few different viewpoints that you can take to this clarity of mind, but I will introduce you one of these that is, I think, very important. Emotional regulation systems. Evolutionary psychology has developed this view in recent years, and the current research is kind of saying that we have actually three different emotional regulation systems. We have calming system, drive system, and threat system. And you can see these streams of consciousness in each of these systems. So what it means is that when we are in this, if this system is activated, we tend to have a lot of content in our consciousness that is related to this system. The blue one, green one, and the red one. This calming system, when it is activated, we feel secure. We feel that there is no threats coming to us, and we can relax, we can rest. We usually seek social connections when this system is activated. We bond with other people, we create networks and groups. And when we are in this system, our perspective is very wide. You know, it can be turned to wherever. But the downside in this system is that we might not be very effective with certain tasks if we have to do those. So then we have this drive system. And when this is activated, we will be focusing very good on certain tasks that we are doing. We know what our goal is, and we are driving towards this goal. And when this system is active, our perspective is a little bit more narrow, because we only see the goal, we need the possibilities for reaching that goal, and then these obstacles that we have to overcome in order to reach that goal. So because of this, our perspective is a little bit narrow, and we don't know if it's the right goal, for example. And another kind of problem here is that this is also eating up resources quite much. And if we are too much in this drive mode during our work days and work weeks, we might find ourselves in this third system, threat system. Now, this threat system is really important if we are in a physical danger, but there are lots of problems when we are doing knowledge work with this system. So when it is activated, we feel lots of anxiety, there's lots of stress. We try to avoid things because we feel kind of insecure. We feel that there are threats coming to us everywhere. You know, these people who in the calming system are something that we seek to have bonding with. In threat system, those might be obstacles or threats for our survival. So in this system, we will have very, very narrow perspective, scanning for possible threats in our environment, and we cannot do any complicated problem solving if this system is activated. So in order to have clarity of mind, we need to know what system we are in currently, and we need to develop ways to go towards this calming system. So the clarity can be reached by concentration. You know, concentration meaning that we know where our attention is, what is happening in our stream of consciousness, and then this calmness, ways of moving our attention to things that will calm us down. So this is the second threat or challenge in the knowledge work. And one practice that you could also do during this presentation and during this conference day is try to find out in which system is activated in you currently and during this day. So the emotional content that you are having. So now you have two practices. One practice to understand what is happening in your mind. Is it wandering or is it focused on this presentation? And the second one, what kind of emotional states are going on there, because those will hijack you quite fast to something else. Okay, then the third one, social complexity. And actually this attentional complexity and cognitive complexity come from this social complexity in a wider perspective. So this means that our work is increasingly happening in self-organizing informal social networks. And those are requiring us to attend the group dynamics that is happening and take a constructive, attend constructively to this group dynamics. So if you think about your own work environments, especially nowadays when most of us are doing remote work, the social networks might be something else that they used to be. You don't have just your team sitting with you and you will spend time with those people, but you will have a different kind of informal networks that are kind of emerging also unintentionally. And in order to understand what is happening around you or in the organizations you are working with, you have to understand the group dynamics. And the antidote for this social complexity is actually compassion. How to take constructive social action. So whenever we are in a group settings, there will be social norms, there will be different kind of habits that are formed, culture, and all of these form in the complex patterns of people interacting. And these patterns emerge unintentionally in many local interactions everywhere in the realm of work that you find yourselves. And in order to understand what is happening in these interactions, you actually need empathy skills. Empathy skills are what enable us to understand what is happening both in our own minds, in us, and in the other people also. There's this picture of this monkey holding a mirror. And if you think about the environment where this monkey lives, there will be a group of monkeys, perhaps 10, 15, something like that. And in order to attend and connect with the other monkeys, this monkey needs to have good empathy skills. He has to understand what is happening inside of the other monkeys. What are the goals they are reaching for currently? In what kind of emotional stage they are now? Because you should not be very close with somebody who is in the threat system. You know, there will be fight and so on. And with people, this also means that we need to understand what is happening in our own minds, because we are resonating with the other people also. Our minds are interdependent, like I said. And I would say that compassion is actually a constructive social action, which is guided by empathy and clarity of mind. And because our mind is interdependent, there's no actually separation between me and the other in this respect. So self-compassion is an important part of this compassion. If we don't know how to be compassionate about ourselves, we cannot be as compassionate with others either. And there's lots of good material around this self-compassion. Some things that are important in this are this, that when we are in challenging situations, we should show kindness towards ourselves rather than judge ourselves, and recognize that we are similar with other people. What is going on in our minds is going on in other people's mind also. And also this aspect of mindfulness that I talked about also. Okay, let's put this all together. So all the three antidotes here. First of all, we talked about concentration. This is the individual aspect of the mind, and this is the antidote for this attentional complexity. In order to have concentration, we need ability to notice where our mind is wandering and the ability to focus it. So mindfulness and focus are the basis of concentration. And when we have this, we can develop clarity of mind. So this is the interpersonal aspect of mind, the antidote for this cognitive complexity. So when we have concentration, so we understand what is going on our mind, we can understand also the emotional content that is there, these kind of emotion regulation systems that are activated. And then we need the ability to go towards this calming system. And then we can have this clarity. So it needs concentration and calm. And the third one is compassion. This is the social dimension of mind and the antidote for this social complexity. When we have a clarity of mind so that we can understand our emotional content, the emotional states that we are currently, and we have ability to move towards this wider perspective so that we can look at the big picture, have the bird's eye perspective on things. We can also then understand what is happening around us with other people's minds. And if we have good empathy skills and this clarity of our own mind, we can have compassion. We can have a constructive social action to attend to these group dynamics that we are witnessing in our environment. So these all three antidotes are built on others. So we need concentration, and when we have that, we can build clarity of mind. When we have clarity of mind, we can build compassion, and this circle will feed itself so that we can build those even better. So this third exercise that you could do today is not just to concentrate on what is happening on your mind, the first exercise, and what is the emotional content in your mind, but also third one, what do you think, what kind of emotional states other people are having that you are having discussions with in this conference, or the presentations, what kind of emotional content those people are having during the presentation. And you can also continue, of course, in your work and family life with these exercises. I want to finish this with talking a little bit about wisdom also. Of course, when we are doing knowledge work, it's not enough just to have a good concentration and emotional regulation and compassion. We need to understand the topics and the fields that we are working, and it requires many kind of wisdom. But I want to highlight one thing from the current research on wisdom, and this is that actually nowadays we think that wisdom and compassion are like two wings of a bird. So in order to move on, we need both, because without compassion, you can't have a very deep understanding of what is happening in these social relationships, and you can't take a constructive action to attend to these group dynamics. And you need also wisdom to understand different kind of things that are happening there and what would be the best possible social actions that you would take. So these feed each other, wisdom and compassion. And I'm sorry we have a little bit shorter time here in online. So where to learn more? Well, there are plenty of good resources. For example, I have this podcast, Mielen Laboratorio, mostly in Finnish, but there are a few episodes in English also. You can find it from Anchor or whatever podcast application you want to use. Then I have these blogs, Fractal Sauna, WordPress.com. This is actually a 10th anniversary year for this blog. There's tons of thinking about organizational development and agile and all that. And then I have this site mielenlaboratorio.fi, where you can find information from my books and other resources, and also one blog about mindfulness, which is called tietoisuustaidot.com. And then these few books that you can read. Mielen Laboratorio, it's about laboratory of mind, similar topics that we have talked about here. And then this George Mead's philosophy of mind, Mieli ja minä, as well as this older book, Less Essays on Business Transformation, where I was one of the co-authors. There's plenty of good topics in that book also. Okay, I think that I have used my time about now, so we can move on to this questions and answers.
Thanks, actually, that was really interesting. Very interesting to listen about your presentation. I think we have some questions already, the questions and answers. So for the audience, now is your moment to ask questions from Ape. But let's start from the first one. So if you feel that these three things, those antidotes, are not in place for the team that you are working with, what are those good tools or discussions to set these in place before example, an important workshop? So,
yes, very good question.
You would recommend us?
Yeah, this is, well, I think that these three antidotes very rarely are in very good places in any teams, but and ourselves, because we don't work so much with this. But one thing that you could do with teams is, for example, this psychological safety, which we talk about a lot in organizations nowadays. So to have discussions about how people are finding themselves in the situations. Do they feel secure because this is the calming system, or do they feel that they are in threat? For example, that if they say something, it might be punished or something like this, because then if you are in this threat system, it's really hard to have a very deep discussions on anything, because it will inhibit all this complex thinking in our minds. So that would be one thing to talk about, how secure we feel in our team settings.
Okay, that's a good advice. We have another questions about what happens to compassion if you have empathy but lack clarity.
This is really good question. You know, I work also in these therapeutic settings, and one thing that you can see happening in our day-to-day relationships many times is that somebody who is very empathic with you will come to you and give you very good advices of what you should do, you know. And I'm sure that we all know these things where the advices are not coming from the place which is objective, but from the people's other own subjective experiences. So they don't really seem to understand the difference between what is happening in their mind and what is happening in the other people's mind. So without this clarity, we will not understand the separation between what are our own needs and what are the needs of the other person, for example. And this is something that for example, therapists will have to be very clear about, in order to be help other people.
Okay. Then we have a question about, I think it seems to be now a value that everyone is nearly always available by email or social media or any other media. So should we resist this? Maybe can you give me some advice how to do that?
Yes.
Should we draw a line somewhere?
Yes, I think so. This is something that I worked a lot in occupational psychology. People with job fatigue are coming, and many times they have, reading emails evenings, late at night, doing every kind of things with their work and other things without any time for themselves to calm down and have this more wider perspective of what is happening. And this is actually a vicious circle, because the more fatigue we feel, the less we have ability to widen our perspective. And many times we have given such an advice with the clients that you should have, for example, 2 different phones, one for the work and the other one for other things, and you leave the phone work to the workplace. Of course, now when we are in this remote work, this is even more difficult for many people, but certainly all these lines where we divide these things are really important, especially if you feel any stress symptoms.
I think we have still time for at least one question. So here we have one question. Tech has increasing number of things to know and to learn. Do you have advice on how to cope with this in development teams? So in generalizing or specializing discussions, are those useful?
Yeah. One aspect that would be quite interesting and important here, I think, is also to understand where this learning and knowing is happening. Because many times we think that we just have information somewhere and then we put it in our heads and then we have it. But like I was telling in this presentation, it is continually evolving and happening in relationships. So pay attention to these relationships where this learning is happening and what kind of structures you have. And perhaps one thing to think about is that what kind of structures would help us to learn the things that we need to learn. What kind of networks we should have. What kind of a medium for discussions that would be continuously having will help in this knowing and learning. I'm sure this isn't a very specific answer to this, but switch a little bit this perspective. Where is the learning and knowing happening, and work with this.
Okay, thank you. So I think we don't have any more questions and answers, so that's good. We managed to answer all of these. So once again, Ari-Pekka, thank you for very interesting presentation. I think the audience also agrees with me with this one.